Welcome back to the Steel City Roundtable. We were gone last week because Pittsburgh got hit with a tornado type storm and we lost power, and I had to go buy a generator. I had to drive like 2.5 hours. So we're finally up and running. My internet got hooked up yesterday, so we're ready to go. Can't think of a better way to start it off. I got a really close friend of mine, a guy I met in my recovery. Pretty much was my guiding light when I was in treatment and kind of helped me navigate the waters of my mental health and my just complete batshit craziness. This is my good friend Matt Brooks. Hey Matt, how you doing, buddy?
Good, good. So glad you had me on today, Mark. And
Oh,
I want
definitely,
to go
brother.
ahead.
I've been looking
Want to go.
forward to it. I've been
Yeah,
looking forward to
absolutely.
it.
This has been a long time coming.
Yeah. So why don't you? I know your story. So why don't you talk to the folks and just give them a little brief, who you are.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, I want to first off congratulate you today on 2 years sober, Mark. I think that's a big, big thing.
Thank you, thank you, thank you,
I
thank you.
remember you back when you were wet behind the ears of this whole recovery gig, coming in fresh, and we're pretty scared, but you were open to a lot of new ideas. So I commend you on 2 years, man, and
Thank you. I appreciate
couldn't
it.
be proud of you.
I
But
appreciate it, man. It means a
yeah,
lot coming from
absolutely.
you.
Yeah, man.
So
Those.
who are you, Matt? Who are these people talking to?
Yeah, Matt Brooks. I'm 39 years old, and I turned 40 this August, Mark. Can you
Oh
believe
boy.
it? Yeah,
Oh boy. You're getting old.
yeah. Over the hill, brother. But no, I grew
Shit,
up
son. I'm 51. What are you talking about?
got a decade on me. Uh, Grew up in Baltimore, Maryland, on a small farm up there with my family, grandmother, grandparents, aunt, uncle. Very family based. Um, really no drinking throughout my entire story until I got to high school, or got to the end of high school, and I was introduced to alcohol for the first time at senior week. Growing up in Maryland, after you graduate high school, you go out to senior week in Ocean City, Maryland, and that's really where the light bulb came on. My mom had been scared pretty much my whole life, never really told me, but my grandfather on her side was an alcoholic, so she grew up with an alcoholic father, and she did her research and read the statistics about it being a genetic thing potentially and skipping a generation. So she was scared that I had it, which I found out later in life I do suffer from this disease called alcoholism. But it really wasn't a problem just because of the way I grew up under a really good roof, parents being supportive, good grades. But I did have this gene, and that beast was kind of awoken. I can remember summer of 2003 when I graduated high school, was exposed to it for the first time. I really enjoyed it. Went off to college in 2003, went to Virginia Tech. It was right after 9/11, September 11th, and I was kind of deciding what I wanted to do with my life, and went into college and went to Virginia Tech, which is a senior military institute, and I decided to join the Corps Cadets in the Army RTC program they had there just because I wanted to serve my country, and I felt like it was my duty, after 9/11. So went to college. My drinking, I was pretty reserved my freshman year just because of the, being on the Corps Cadets, being under watch. But as your years go on, in your sophomore year, junior year, senior year, you get more privileges, and I enjoyed the apartment parties on the weekend. Joined a social fraternity in my sophomore year. Obviously, lots of drinking, but just I think because I had that structure, of having to be back by curfew, living on campus all 4 years, being in like a military style, and that's, one of the things that's a theme throughout my story is having this structure and accountability built in my story. And drinking was fun until it didn't become fun. I don't know if you can relate to that at all.
Yeah, I mean, you know my story, and you know how I got into, I started drinking when I was 17, and
Yep.
it solved the problem for me. It hit everything, and then it got to the point where it was just what I did. It was just how I lived, and it's crazy how it does it. Like, so for everybody that doesn't know, Matt and I met at Transformations Recovery Center down in Delray Beach, Florida. He was the first guy I met when I was ready to kill Johnny and punch him in the head because he was driving me nuts, having me fill out all these forms. But let's go. Let's do this. Let's go from where we met and talk a little bit about our relationship, and then
Yeah.
we'll go into like your full blown. I'd like to hear your whole story.
Yeah, for sure. So, you want to pick it up at transformations and kind of
Yeah,
that?
just pick it up
Yeah,
at that day
yeah.
you walked
So,
into the office and I'm sitting there.
yeah, man. So I came down to this place Mark's talking about, transformations here in Delray Beach, which is, pretty much the recovery capital of the world. So of the United States at least. coming to the transformations for my third iteration. And I ran into Mark in Johnny's office, and Johnny, pulls me up and goes, "Hey, I need you to meet this guy. He's, first responder. And I think you guys would get along." And I met Mark, and I quite literally, he's a big bad dude with tats and earrings and bald head, pretty intimidating, but this dude was shaking, like pretty much scared out of his boots of what he had just walked into. And we instantly, connected, and it turns out, this gentleman was going to be my roommate, and we were going to have an impact on each other's stay, at least for the next, I forget how long you were actually there for. Maybe you just did the 30 days or whatever.
I was there 37 days.
Yep.
Because I stayed an extra 2 weeks.
35 days, and I could see the determination. They call it, one and done, right? The one and done treatment center. You're a miracle. The percentage of people that actually can get it their first time is absolutely, the statistics are stacked against us. Whether it's your first treatment or it's your 10th treatment. Statistically, I think they say about 95%, will not stay sober. Look left, look right. That guy's probably not going to make it, and you're just a shining star of, doing it right coming out of the gates. But while we were at Transformations, we were roommates, and one of the things having been on, I think it was like my 11th, 12th maybe, inpatient or PHP style treatment center. So I had all this wealth of knowledge, and I had no problem, seeing somebody like you that was really, kind of like a sponge and kind of just like soaking up everything you could get. That's kind of like how our relationship started.
Yeah, I mean, when I came in there, my story. I was at a really bad treatment center for my detox.
Yo, that's right.
And it was so horrible. It was just a shit show. And when I got to Transformations, I remember I was just like, fuck, what am I doing? I'm like, oh my God, like this place is freaky. I'm walking around, there's people everywhere. I don't know anybody. I hate everyone. My anxiety.
You're the angry man.
Yeah, I was the angry man. And, and you walked into that office and he was like, yeah, Matt's former military. He's one of our, prime examples of how we do things. And, I was living by myself for like 4 days, and then they were going to give me a roommate. I was like, Matt, you want to be my roommate? Like, I'll move in with you. And you're like, yeah, biggest mistake of your life. But, you had such an impact on me in treatment because, you remember we would sit there, we'd go out, shoot hoops, or we literally spent most of our time together. And, I don't know if that was by design, but it's what I needed. I needed to have that person that I could trust because, transformation was like you were still part of society, but I was so closed off to everything. Like if it wasn't for you and it wasn't for the people in the VFR program, like there's no way I stayed sober there. I would have left, but you've had a rough road. You've had a really rough road, especially since I've met you. You've had your ups and downs just like everybody does. Why don't you, now that everybody knows that you are fucked because you're my friend for life, go back and kind of, you started talking about how you started drinking when you were younger.
Sure.
Let's talk about like what your mental state is and what void did the alcohol fill, or what was the effect that caused you to want to continue to drink once you had your first drink?
Oh, I mean, I can't really describe it other than like they say in the gram cycle. We had this allergy to alcohol, and my body has a thing when I put anything into it. Really, at this point in my life, I have that addiction, that addicted personality. When you put something in it, like the light bulb goes off, and your body just wants more and more and more. So I couldn't really pinpoint it, back in the day, because like you're just doing everything that the boys are doing, right? You're just hanging out. You're in college, like this is acceptable. You're supposed to go to college, enjoy your time. So like it wasn't a problem, like I said, until it became a problem. Even when I went into active duty, after I graduated in 2007, I went out to my first duty station in Fort Lewis, and I was roommates with 4 other guys I had just went to college with. We were all second lieutenants now in the Army. And so it was like just a continuation of college, except we had big boy jobs and we're making a lot more money. So instead of Natty Light, we're drinking like, Bud Light, because we have so much more money, right? So we can treat ourselves. And, but again, the common theme of having, the military telling me where to be, what time I have to be there, how to dress, really kept me together. I have no doubts looking back, if I had not chosen to go the military like ROTC route in college, I doubt my ability to have completed the 4 years of education.
So
I think it would have caught up to me a lot sooner than it did, not having that as structure and that accountability um, in my life for so long. And
yeah, I mean, people, alcoholics, we need structure, right? Like our life is structured around using for an alcoholic or an addict, our life is the structure that we put it into is the structure on what am I going to do today to get what I need, right?
yeah,
Did you have was there a mental health issue when you started drinking? Like, were you like me? Like, I was very shy. I didn't feel like I belonged anywhere. So when I drank, it filled that void and it made me feel like I was finally like okay. Like I was like everybody else. I was normal, you know?
that liquid courage, right? As we
Yeah.
commonly call it. So yeah, I mean, like growing up on a farm, I was pretty sheltered, I would say. I wasn't, I had a great childhood, I would go to sleepovers and go to birthday parties, but I didn't grow up in like a neighborhood where like you were socially, around a lot of kids a lot of the time. So I think that had an impact, me in like high school, even like I hung out, with like the quote unquote the nerdy kids. So I was in the AP classes. Like I was fine with that. Um, you know, and then when I got to college, it definitely had a thing, when you started going to parties, like I wasn't the ladies guy or, whatever you want to call it, but once I had a couple drinks in me, then, I grew a pair of dancing legs, I felt like everything was okay and I could be the real me, quote unquote, with a couple beers in myself. So I definitely relate to that aspect.
So, you started drinking, you go to college, you're drinking heavily in college. Were you a very social person or were you kind of
Oh,
sheltered?
yeah,
Were you quiet?
absolutely.
You were?
Yeah, yeah. So my senior superlative when I graduated my senior year at our military ball, I was voted most likely to be seen downtown out of my entire graduating class.
Yeah. See,
So the drinking gave me this identity, this ego that really, I enjoyed even throughout my, my military career, being known as the guy you could give a call, any day that ended in a Y, Matt would be willing to go out with you that night, right? Um, you know, it just fed this ego, this identity that wasn't the true me inside. It's not how I was raised.
now how did that grow, after college and through your early military career? Like, how did that, this parasite, like, take over your entire existence?
Yeah, I mean, it started right out of the gates, having more money. Um, the saying with, somebody that's an alcoholic like me, more money, more problems is a true thing, um, until you don't have any money. And then you just realize, then it's a whole nother, you open up a whole nother can of worms. But yeah, I mean, like I was able to keep it together, through my first duty assignment. I was deployed to Iraq in 2009 to 2010, with my unit. Got back, did the normal progression, got picked up for promotion to captain, went down to school of military intelligence, and that's when I really noticed the shift in my drinking pattern. Coming back from the Middle East, the combat tour with my unit, and then going down there, going to this school to be trained on MI, which is military intelligence in Fort Huachuca, living with two other roommates. We had this job, we were going to get trained, get the top secret clearance, the whole 9 yards. But when we got done the day with class and come back to our house, like the shift from beer to liquor had begun, right? And this is the crazy part of our addiction, right? When we, I started transitioning to clear liquor from beer, vodka. That's my drink of choice, right? I love me some vodka. So me and the roommates decided we're going to do this 60-day workout program, the Insanity DVD series. I don't remember if you remember, that got really popular back in the day. So me and the roommates, we'd come back from class, hit the Insanity DVD series, and then I switched from beer to liquor because I thought that was healthier for me, at night. And I can remember, the two other roommates, they weren't even drinking, and I'd have my little ritual, my shot station set up in the kitchen, right? I'd have the handle, the shot glass and the chase or the Gatorade or whatever. And I would just go in there, every 15 minutes, take a shot and just go through each night just like that. You know, I wouldn't be too hungover in the morning. It was just enough to kind of, take my emotions away, keep me chill. Obviously on Fridays and Saturdays and Sunday fun days, you'd party a little bit harder. But by Monday, I was ready to get back to it and, do what was expected of me until class was over, and it was just the same cycle over and over again. And that's where I could really kind of pinpoint where my shift, just from like being a social drinker, you know, problematic drinker, really brought out those alcoholic tendencies where you're drinking alone.
Now, when you came home from active duty in Afghanistan, and
Yeah,
you don't have to talk
Iraq.
about this if you don't want to. I'm sorry, Iraq. I am corrected. If you don't want to talk about it, it's cool. But like, what was it like? Because there's, I'm sure there's some veterans that
Mhm.
watch this that are struggling right now with either addiction, mental health,
Sure.
alcoholism, or both, or all three. And they can probably relate to what you say. What was the transition like coming back in country and trying to get used to a place where not everybody was trying to kill you?
Yeah, I mean, I remember, coming back. It was a pretty quick transition. I remember getting picked up from our redeployment ceremony. They bring you back to the gym, you do a quick formation, and then my best friends from the Washington area, they were civilians, picked me up, and I remember in the car, they picked me up with a cooler full of ice beer down, brought me back to the house that I had rented out. Was waiting for me was a handle of vodka, a couple steaks, some shells and cheese, and some garlic bread. They knew that was my favorite meal, and I was right off to the races as soon as I got back. Drinking a beer, not even, you know, 30 minutes, 15 minutes. I wasn't even out of the parking lot of the gymnasium on base before I was drinking beer. So like I picked up exactly where I left off.
Now,
Um,
was that a product of like what you saw and what you dealt with out of country, or was it
yeah.
just that, like, like there was, I guess what I'm getting at was there like a damage is already done, right? And instead of facing the shit that you deal with, we
Hmm.
turn to the alcohol, right? We turn right to the thing that
Yes.
takes away the shit we don't want to think about.
Yeah.
I mean,
I mean, and I grew up, um, kind of a lot of this learned behavior is comes from childhood, right? I grew up with a very strong dad who you never saw cry, you never saw express emotions except when he was the disciplinarian in the family, right? Dad went off to work, mom took care of you, but you grew up, in my household, you have to shove that down, and that's just further reinforced by the military, right? Because you go to work, especially as whatever a senior NCO as an officer like I was, you get a platoon of guys, you got to keep everything at work, you got to keep everything suppressed down because you don't want your guys to see that, because your unit takes on your persona almost. If you come in carrying weights from the outside, whether that's you had a fight with the girlfriend the night before, you're going through some kind of addiction, you can't show that. So you learn this very good art of wearing a mask, right? This idea of being something in front of other people, where I learned to, based on my environment and my surroundings, I learned how to disguise myself very well.
we're
And
chameleons. That's what we are. That's what we do.
we're chameleons, bro. You know, and I got really good at it. Um, until the point, you come to treatment for the first time, right? And all of a sudden you're in a room with 15, 20 other strangers, and they ask you to do a check-in, how you're feeling. Well, fuck your feelings. I'm feeling great, right? I don't got to
Yep.
tell you the truth.
Yep.
It's that whole
We're master
process of,
manipulators. We can
yep,
manipulate anybody.
definitely, man.
The reason why I ask about this is because you never really talked about your military service except for like in country. So in my mind, that automatically said, well, there's some bad shit happened, right? Some shit
Hmm.
happened that affected his life and, got him on this path of, cover up drinking, right? Now, how did that progress? Like you come home, you're drinking within a half hour off the base. And then when did you start to realize that this shit was no longer like, this was no longer something you had any type of control over?
Yeah. Um, I would definitely say so. I did my second tour to the Middle East in 2012. I got stationed in Savannah, Georgia, with Third ID, which is Savannah is a great drinking town for an alcoholic. Um, and went to did my second combat tour. Came back in 2013, and me and my best friend at the time, we decided that it was time for us to, grow up and get our own places. We had been living together pretty much our whole military career, so we decided it was our first time to to go our separate ways and maybe meet some girls and kind of grow up a little bit, like I said. But when I live by myself, now you have just given me a complete open door to drink around the clock, right? Because
Hmm.
no longer am I worried about anybody judging me, about drinking as soon as I get home, because nobody knows, right? So um, that's when I can really kind of pinpoint it really took off. Um, there was always a bottle of liquor. Um, I was still like the social guy. I was going out every night. And like one of these things, that kind of has been reinforced was, the fact that I was still like an all-star at work, right? So a lot of people that had the chance to question me, or, I'm talking about like superiors, my direct supervisors, they could have been like, "Hey Matt, we noticed you're coming in every day a little disheveled," or "You have to have a fan on your desk because you can't stop sweating because you're hungover." Like I mean, like it's pretty blatant, what goes on after I get hard, but it's again the culture: work hard, play hard, right? And that was kind of the whole thing with the military. It's normalized. You just suck it up and get on with your life, and you do what's asked of you. And so I think it could have been identified and dealt with a lot earlier in my career, but it continued to progress. Um, to the point where my next duty assignment was Chicago, and I was up there teaching ROTC, and I now have a condo downtown Chicago, another amazing city if you have this addiction of this disease of addiction. Living by myself, where it's cold, pretty much, 8 months of the year, and I'm living in a condo. As soon as I got to Chicago, I remember as soon as I pulled in my car, threw my bags in my empty apartment, and I immediately just started walking down Halsted Street looking for the first open bar. And that bar became my cheers bar, so to say, where everybody knows your name, right, for the next 2.5 years. And yeah, it got to the point, like I said, where drinking was fun until it wasn't fun, where you're waking up in the morning now and you're heaving on the way to work, going to PT, physical training, or having to take a couple shots first thing in the morning just to keep yourself normal going into work. And that's that's not normal for people, right?
It was normal for
That's not
us. It
normal
was normal
behavior.
for
It's
us.
normal to us because that's what we're doing to survive.
Hmm.
Completely uneducated about um, what drinking or any addiction can do to you when you have crossed that line. And it got pretty bad. And again, it was drinking to be socially accepted. I didn't really know any other hobbies outside of work and drinking. Go to work, drink, go to work, drink, weekend, drink, drink, get ready for Monday, go back to work. And that was what, kept me going. Those were my two identities. As soon as I put the uniform off, I was whatever Captain Brooks, and when I got done, I was your best drinking buddy Brooks. That's how it
Hmm.
was for, pretty much my whole military career until I got in trouble. And we can talk about that a little more here in a second.
Yeah, you like you said, you take this wherever you want to go. So what prompted your first trip to rehab?
Yeah. Basically, it came down to uh, me going to Fort Knox, Kentucky, for training camp. As an RTC instructor, you have a duty every summer to go down there for about 45 days, and you get a platoon of cadets from all over the country, different colleges that come in for evaluation. And I remember I got down there to Fort Knox, and I decided that my drinking, for whatever reason, I decided my drinking was probably I could use this 45 days to dry out. And I remember just stopping cold turkey the first night, pretty rough, couldn't really eat the next morning. And then the second night, the withdrawals really hit to the point where I started like shaking and I was like, what is going on with me? So I jumped on, you know, probably the best thing I could have done and Googled alcohol withdrawal and started reading the symptoms, right? It's, anxiety, sleeplessness, insomnia, shaking, sweats, and then it gets down to the bottom of the list and it starts talking about seizures, CT, possible death. And I was like, oh God, okay. Uh, I'm gonna go to the ER and get checked out. And that's when they were like, they gave me some Ativan and they said how much you drink, and you know, of course, probably didn't tell the truth. And but they were like, yeah, we think you have you're withdrawing from alcohol. And I was like, oh, that's crazy. And they were like, well, since you came in here, it's not going to be like a command referral, but we're going to have you do a medical referral and assessment into the Army Substance Abuse Program. And so that's when I got put into my first quote unquote IOP, or it came to light in the military that, you know, I wasn't drinking like the rest of my peers. So that's when it really came to light.
How much were you drinking at that point?
Phew, man.
Because I mean,
You
I
know,
know when
we're
we talked, you made me look like a choir boy.
yeah, probably at that point we're talking at least a fifth of hard liquor a day plus beers.
Mhm.
Um, I was definitely drinking before I even went out at night, to the bars, at least 6 to 8 deep, before I got out there. And then when I got back to the condo alone, I just kept on, going until, probably I passed out, 9 times out of 10. Woke up and did it all over again. But yeah, it was an unhealthy amount. By the grace of God, I still don't have any permanent physical, injuries to my kidneys or liver or body. But in my alcoholic mind, every time, you go back to the doctor or you relapse, the doctor clears you. So what does that tell you? What does that tell me? Oh,
I'm
it's not
okay to
that
drink.
bad yet. I can
I'm
keep
okay to
going
drink.
back. I can keep going back, right? And by the grace of God, like I said, I haven't had any permanent injuries until this last time that I decided I was going to go on a short 1 week spree, and I wound up in the hospital, and they kept me overnight for pancreatitis, which is not fun if you've ever had it. So like I said, I'm almost approaching 40, and the relapses are shorter and shorter. I can't go on multiple weeks, month-long runs anymore. Like, it's only a matter of a few days to a week before I wind up back needing help in some regard from a hospital or ER.
I mean, so let's go into that. You've been to numerous rehabs. Like, what's your rehab journey? Like,
Yeah, for
I
sure,
mean,
man.
I think we got an hour befur my lights shut off, but we can
Okay, no, we're
go as
good.
long. We need like
No,
a week to talk about this.
I know. Maybe we can do a part two.
It would
Uh,
definitely anytime.
no, I got recovery church tonight. Which my faith, we haven't even talked about faith in God. All throughout my military career and college career, I was raised very Christian. Going to Sunday school every Sunday, and youth group on Sunday nights, church camp during the summer. But once I hit 18 and went off to college, and for the next 4 years of college, 12 years of my active duty, even through deployments, I never even relied or even prayed to God, until I got back to transformations in 2020. But my faith is another topic for another day, that we can explore, how my higher power. And but yeah, what was the question again? I get off topic.
What was your recovery journey like?
Oh yeah, yeah,
Like,
for sure. So like,
because you said you've
yep,
been to numerous rehabs. Like, how
yep.
did
So
that
my
play out?
first rehab was actually in 2016. So we're coming up on 9 years of me doing the damn thing, um in and out of multiple treatment centers. But it was my boss at work at the time noticed I was a little out of it. He could smell it on me basically, and wanted me. I was uh, looking back in the grace of God again. He let me go seek an assessment, and I got sent to my first residential treatment center in 2016, while still in active duty. I did 3 weeks there. I was exposed to the literature of AA for the first time. I was around other veterans that were there for whatever alcohol, pain meds, that were still in active duty, or they had gotten out. But I was around other people that shared similar values, but that were suffering with this disease that I still wasn't admitting to myself at this time. Like, I had no intention of quitting going to my first treatment center, because I remember getting back to Chicago after those 3 weeks. All my drinking buddies picked me up, and they were 110% behind me. We went to Dick's Steakhouse there in downtown Chicago. Went down, had a lovely meal. They were all drinking water. These are my drinking buddies, and they had my back, right? And I think it was only a matter of like 3 or 4 days. I was back out with them, and we were at a bowling alley, and Some of them were drinking diet soda or Coke, to support me again, still having my back. Um, but I decided, after 3 or 4 days, I was going to have a couple beers, and I had those couple beers, and I went back to my condo that night and went to bed. And you know what? I woke up the next day thinking, Mark, I can drink again because I showed myself I only had 2 beers last night,
And
and
the
it
wheels
wasn't
fall off
long.
all over again.
And then it wasn't, before long that 2 beers from that night before turned into, a 12 pack, and then that 12 pack turns back into a fifth, which turns into a handle of liquor pretty quick.
So, it's so fascinating to me because, I've been lucky, I've been blessed in that I've been able to have a great support network, and the recipe that I'm using is working. It's not easy, but the things I'm doing are working, right? And the things I did in rehab are working. I mean, what is it like to, I hate to put it this way, but what's it like to be a frequent flyer in the rehab system?
Yeah,
Like,
yeah, man.
you know enough to run a rehab from what you've seen, truthfully.
Uh, I know. That's actually one of my goals one day.
I know. We'll
This,
talk about that too.
sure. Yeah, goals and purpose is an awesome topic. Um, but yeah, being a frequent flyer, I mean, like, I went back to transformations 3 times, right? But it's funny, like at the ER that I was at in Richmond, the civilian ER, they actually had me labeled as a frequent flyer in their ER because I get these bad cases of gastritis, after days of binge drinking, and it's where you can't basically keep anything down. You get super dehydrated, you're vomiting constantly, and like the only option is basically to go seek medical treatment. They give you a lot of fluids and Ativan. And then I knew this one ER would do that. It was like Humpty Dumpty falling off the wall. I fall down. I got great insurance at this point. I'm retired from the medically retired from the military. They're going to give me a script of Ativan to walk away with. I go down to the Walgreens, cash my Ativan, detox for a couple days on my own, and then by day 3, when I'm feeling better, I'm back. And that's because I really didn't have an identity or purpose at that point in my life when I exited the military. But being a frequent flyer, I mean, at this point, it's part of my story, right? I was actually talking to my therapist today about wanting to make up for lost time. So often in early recovery, you look back at your life and you see all these mistakes you led and all the things that, addiction has led you to. And all of a sudden you want to get your life back all at once. And, 9 times out of 10, that's been a common theme for me is when I want to go back to grad school, I want to go back and live in Maryland with my parents. I want to, start putting letters behind my name, through grad school, becoming a therapist, seeking my MBA. Like, I need to make up for all this lost time because I'm so often comparing myself to other people where they're at in life, right? They got the jobs, the career, the family, all that other bullshit they put on Facebook. That's really just a front, right? Because that's all it is. But I'm sitting here and I'm not happy with myself because that's what I do. I want to get all this nice stuff. I want to put out this perception that I'm doing so well when really inside I am just getting eat up alive. So at this point in my life, like, you know, being a frequent flyer, I mean, like, I have to come to the point where I just don't care what people think about me. Like, if I'm doing what I know is best for me, then so be it. Number one, baby. You know, so everybody else be damned. Because at the end of the day, especially going back to a treatment center, you know what I said. To have somebody like you that I talk to still on a regular basis 2 years later, that's like literally a 1% chance if you think about it when you go to a treatment, especially as many treatment centers as I've been to. The number of people I maybe still talk to on a monthly, quarterly basis, yearly basis, you're one of like maybe 3 or 4.
I mean, like the thing, I always worry about you. Like, I'm not gonna lie, I always worry about you because we formed a really close bond really quickly. Like, you are my brother,
Yeah.
and when you had your struggles last year, and I hate to say it, but I knew it was coming because I'm like, oh, he's not answering the phone right now. He's not responding to text messages. He's avoiding me. Oh, gee, that's what I would do if I was drinking right now. And then finally we talked and you're like, this is what's going on and I'm taking care of it. I'm handling it, which I'm so proud of you for not letting it get to the point where it's gotten in the past, you know, because I remember when you came to Transformations, the time I was there, your friends put you on a plane. Wasn't that the time they paid for you and said, you're going back, and they put you on a plane and sent you to Florida?
Yeah, I mean, like, my best friends came out of Richmond and basically did an intervention for me. So, um, at this point, I was under some legal trouble, and that'd be my, if I had any advice, uh, was I went to treatment to transformations on my own will once I was done. If I was on federal probation, and I had just gotten my interlock out of my car. My lease was up, and I put all of my stuff into storage, humbling myself for the first time in my life, truly. You know, Matt Brooks had the nice Escalade in the driveway, the great house in Richmond. You know, for the first time in my life, I was basically homeless, I would say. I put all my stuff in the storage and I came down to Florida to do it right. I committed to 3 months of transformations and then I did the sober living thing. I didn't do the 35-day cookie cutter course and try to go right back to Richmond. I had tried that, whatever, umpteen number of times, and it just wasn't working for me. So, um, coming down to Florida and just doing it right with the ability to make a choice and not having to return to my same environment has been like the best decision I've made for my recovery in the past 2 years.
Yeah, I mean, they always say get rid of people, places, and things. You pretty much got rid of that before you came down, you know,
Yeah,
and you started with a clean slate. And
I
I mean,
did.
you still struggled. You still struggled the first time down there, you know, when we
Sure.
were there. I'm not going to tell your story. That's for you to tell when you want to, if you want to. But, folks, he had a rough go of it, and he's coming out on top of it. Like, this is the healthiest I've seen you. Since we were at treatment playing basketball outside in 95-degree heat, like, you look healthy. You're not bloated. Your face isn't red. You just look healthy.
Yeah,
Um, I
feel
mean,
great.
it's a common thread here. Like, our life falls apart, but we don't do anything until it completely falls apart. Um, you know, what do you describe as your rock bottom? Like, what was the actual like minute where you said, okay, and I'm not talking about the first rehab, the second rehab, the third
Yeah.
rehab, the fourth. I'm talking about when you decided that you're going to be 100% honest with yourself and other people, and you're going to put all your effort into getting healthy.
Yeah.
What
I,
what took you there?
let's see. Having my lights cut off in Richmond at my house for the first time ever because I couldn't pay the electric bill. Having an eviction notice posted on my door because my alcoholism had spiraled so far that I was placing everything on taking out personal loans, reckless spending, you name it. I was into debt up to my eyeballs. And like just the helpless feeling of just sitting there in my living room and then all of a sudden the lights going off because the power company shut it off or facing an eviction notice. It's like, how did I get to this point? And still that wasn't my rock bottom. That was kind of like the forcing function that, made me move out of Richmond to try to better my life. For me, like there's always a worse, there can always be another bottom, right? The worst ultimate bottom is 6 feet under, right? And I
Mm.
haven't reached that by the grace of God. By all intents and purposes, because of, some of my actions, I should probably be in jail. I shouldn't be talking to you right now.
Or dead,
Um,
or dead.
or debt. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Or
We
six
both
feet
we both
under,
got, we're
man.
both lucky. We're both lucky in
Yeah.
that aspect.
But
Um,
I had something watching out for me that has, placed me here on Cinco de Mayo, celebrating your 2 year sober anniversary, and
an
getting ready to
ironic
go to
date to
church
be
tonight.
sober. An ironic date to be sober.
Oh, it's great, man. It's fun.
And FYI, I got engaged this week, folks. I'm getting
There you
married to a Latina, and she says Cinco de Mayo is an American holiday, and it's bullshit. So, that's a common fight in my household now because I think it's real.
go.
Um, but like, I guess what I'm getting at, Matt, is like, and this may be too far to go,
Mm.
mental health wise. You know, some of
Yeah.
us don't face the demons. Some of us don't do the work mentally when we get sober, right? And then that's like almost a guaranteed relapse because if we
Right.
don't if we don't take care of our underlying causes. I think we talked about this a lot when I was down there. Our alcoholism is a symptom of something worse, something deeper, something more profound.
It sure is.
And I think that all addicts or alcoholics suffer from a mental health disorder in some way, shape, or form. It's not the same way with, mental health patients that don't have alcoholism. Like, I don't think they have the same thing happening altogether. But I really, truly think that, if you're an addict or an alcoholic, there's something much deeper. And I think we all are afflicted with some level of mental health issues. What was it for you mentally?
Yeah, and just real quick, I think a lot of those underlying issues can be identified if we take a little time to do childhood work. I was very blessed to go to a center out in Arizona called the Meadows, a very famous center for codependency. But one of the weeks they actually separate you, and the entire week you focus on like childhood issues, childhood trauma, how you grew up, to kind of look at how that shaped, your values, your belief system, how you act out now. I think that's an important part that everybody needs to explore at some point in their life. I just was really blessed with the opportunity to do it. But getting back to your point, we talk about drinking just being a symptom of like PTSD, right? From military, from police work. I couldn't agree with you more. I've studied mental health, the disease of addiction, in pretty good lengths. I actually just got accepted last week to go full time at Capella online for get my full time mental health counseling degree starting July. Yeah, so I'll be pursuing my goals of becoming a therapist one day with a focus in addiction and treatment. So, but yeah, drinking is just a mere symptom of our trauma, and for the veterans and the first responders out there listening, it all goes back to I don't want to ask help for something I know I have, right? The stigma. I recently just met a young kid who is going through separation from the army. He's enlisted, and he I think he popped hot or something on his UA test, and was coming to them, saying he had mental health issues, and he was immediately like, black sheep from the rest of his peers as soon as he started raising his hand. They were calling him weak. And this is 2025. When it's acceptable, and that's still, the shaming is still going on among our ranks. Me back in 2012 when I got back Afghanistan, I sure as hell ain't raising my hand to say I got a little anxiety, right?
Yeah, I mean, and that's huge.
This is 13 years ago when mental health wasn't even talked about.
It's such a huge deterrent for people to get help. It's such a huge deterrent when you know that the people that stand to the left and right of you no longer have their faith in you and your ability.
Mm-hmm.
Once you say, "Hey, I'm not okay," they're like, "Hey, you're not with me anymore."
Hey,
see you later.
You're going to a training room on the other side of post, and we're going to process you for separation because now you're a liability.
Yeah,
you're non-deployable. And like I know we had talked about it, and going through the Help for Our Heroes program at TTC, I know the stigma's even worse in like the police force, and the for guys that are firefighters. Like, that's just like there's no way you're ever going to admit that there's anything bothering you, because you're going to get pushed to a desk job, right? You're going to have your gun taken away from you. You're going to, X, Y, or Z.
Mm-hmm.
At least the military, started coming around with like, the mental health clinic, the substance abuse programs. But that's, you can definitely tell me because you know better than I do. I don't think that stuff exists for the guys that are out here defending our front lines in the U.S.
Well, I mean, there are. I mean, we'll talk about this. We'll continue this on another conversation.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's coming along slowly but surely. But there's people that are being unjustly forced out because they ask for help for PTSD and mental health, and instead of them getting all the availability, all the resources, instead they try to find a reason to say that, well, that's not really what's going on. You're just lazy, so we're just going to push you out. You know what I mean? Like, they don't want to. Nobody wants to address the issue until something bad happens. So, like, if a cop shoots himself in the head tomorrow, it'll probably be a COVID-related death. It won't be mental health. It's just the way it is. Yeah. So your journey has been long and distinguished. What has changed in your approach to treatment and your approach to specifically your post-treatment recovery?
Yeah, man. Every time I go back to, or have a relapse, because there is a difference, I think. Having a slip up and having a complete blown relapse, but it's an opportunity to go back to the drawing board and kind of identify what wasn't working, in your program of recovery. And I know something like me and you, you know, um, probably have differed on is, the aspect of like, uh, probably like higher power or whatever. When I came down to, transformations in 2020, I was reintroduced to my faith. I was, they took us to church on Sunday. They actually had a Christian track, and I got rebaptized in 2020. And it's ironic, the church they took us to in 2020 is now my home church. I actually went through onboarding with them a couple years ago, and I'm a member of that church today with the same pastors that baptized me, 5 years ago that I never thought I'd see again. Now I consider them mentors, which is just another tribute to my journey through faith. But at the end of the day, we talk about you know getting out of the military, and that's where I struggled so much because I lost that structure, I lost that accountability, and quite frankly, like all of my self-esteem, my self-worth when I took the uniform off went away, right? Because
So
that for so yeah,
I got to stop you and ask you a question because you just said something very important that I've always wanted to ask you.
yeah.
Um, did you identify yourself by the military? Like you were the Army at the time, Lieutenant, correct? Or
I was a
Captain
major when I got
Major
out. Yep.
Brooks. I'm
Yeah.
Major Brooks. This is me. This is me. And then once that was gone, you didn't know who you were anymore.
Oh,
Because that's what
I
I.
was I was scrambling. Like it's like they in the way I exited, was pretty abrupt. And I'll share this. Alcohol brought my career to an end at 12 years active duty. I didn't have a lenient boss that told me to, go get checked out and check yourself back into treatment because the number of times I had, my get out of jail free cards were up. And yeah, so my abrupt end of the military, you go through a week of transitional classes that don't do anything for you, like resume building and interviewing skills, and all of a sudden, boom, now you're in the middle. I'm 33 years old, living in Richmond, have a house to myself, and I'm waking up for the first time, not reporting to anybody or telling me what to do with my day. Now, can you imagine that for the first time in 33 years, I don't have anybody telling me what to do, and I have this disease I call addiction that is knocking on my door, and all these issues of trauma, and what do I do? And by the way, Uncle Sam now has given me a nice monthly pension and an unlimited get out of jail free card because now I have really good insurance, or the VA in my backyard where I can just get put that back together or heavily medicated, right? So it's off to the races in 2019 when I got out, and I didn't know who I was chasing meaningless jobs, uh, and it just was, they call it in the AA program a self-will run riot. My disease was progressing, the amount of drinking I was doing was going, if you thought that was a lot when I was on active duty, now give me the whole day to myself with no consequences, and you get off, you just the consequences do start adding up because like the definition of addiction is like a return to a behavior you repeat over and over again despite increasing consequences,
And they
right?
call
Does
that
that sound
insanity.
familiar to anybody?
They call that
Like,
insanity.
huh?
They call that insanity.
Well, yeah, that too. It's a stuff will run right at that point. For me, looking back, 6 years ago, this, it was absolutely insane, man.
So let's fast forward. We talked a lot of bad shit, right? We've talked about all the struggles. Basically, what we're seeing is that we all struggle. Addicts, alcoholics, we all go through the same things. It just manifests itself in different ways for all of us, right? Like, so for me, it was isolation. It was drinking because I didn't identify as anybody because I quit the police department. So I didn't know who I was anymore. I didn't have anybody to be responsible to. I didn't have a direction in my life. You and I are very similar in that. Um, what is your life like now? Like, I know you found your faith. Oh, by the way, that says Jesus loves yins. I went back to church. I've been there twice. Now, granted, the last time was like 4 months ago, but I'm still going. I'm not angry at God anymore. But it's where is your life now? I know you said you kind of had a little slip up a few months ago,
Yeah.
but like, where are you at in general? Like, tell people, what they can expect in life if you put your efforts towards the positive reconstruction of your psyche, of
Yeah,
your
man.
mental
I
health.
mean, they describe it as a life beyond your wildest dreams, right? I have freedom today. I have peace. Um, I root myself in my identity as a child of God, at the end of the day. That's really where my identity is every day. I start my daily routine with we talk about, I have four pillars of my sobriety, and those are accountability, structure, intentionality, and humility. I'm sorry, I'm getting a little rain going right now, but that's okay. But yeah, so I wake up every day with a morning routine. I wake up, I grab my big book, I head out to this back patio here in beautiful South Florida. I read pages 86 to 88 on awakening. I turn to page 63. I read my third step prayer. I turn my will and care over to God. I read a daily devotional, which you've been the recipient of, a few times. I send that out, because that just increases my accountability, right? If I don't send out my daily devotional, for a couple days, people are gonna be like, "Hey, Matt, I missed my daily reading. Where are you at?" I got people that are checking up on me, right? That just helps me. I'm doing it for me at the end of the day when I send that stuff out.
Yeah.
Plus, I'm helping others, uh, on the side. But I uh, I have a good balance in life. I think that's huge. We can talk about balance of your daily and your weekly schedule. Um, I have my recovery place first, when I wake up in the morning, because I'm hitting the big book as soon as I wake up, doing that daily meditation and reading every single day. When we talk about our values, right, I do this exercise, as a smart recovery facilitator. I ask people to list their top five values, and, often they'll list, I value my health, I value my career, I value my wife or my relationship, I value my family, I value money, I value X, Y, or Z. But you know what 95% of people don't list on their value list, let alone at the top? Nobody ever remembers to list their sobriety, you know, because if you place your sobriety at the top of the list, you lose your sobriety. It doesn't matter what you put after sobriety on your list, it goes out the window pretty freaking quick.
What was I saying? You and I have different recoveries, right? Like, you are very faith
Mm-hmm.
based. You are like
Yep.
the epitome of what AA teaches you, to have the higher power, to give up control, to basically look into this being or this idea and give them your will, right? Time. I go, like, sometimes I go 3 times, sometimes I go 2 times. At the end of the day, AA is there for me, not so much as a, hey, I'm having a bad day and I need to talk to somebody. It's like, hey, I haven't talked to so and so in a while. I need to go to this meeting today,
Yeah.
because I know I'll see them there. Like tonight. Tonight's, I'm going to go to my home group, which, I don't get to see as much as I used to. But I'm going up there so I can see people and get my 2-year coin,
Let's
you know.
go.
So I'm going back up there tonight, and I haven't seen a lot of those people in a while because, like, the AA meetings traveled with me as I moved. But like, you're so educated in like smart recovery, AA recovery. You probably read Recovery Dharma too, knowing you, little nerd. But you're so versed in the recovery, and it really it blows my mind away that I'm the one that's sitting here with 2 years sobriety. Like, you are so dedicated to your recovery. Maybe you can go into like the things people may not expect that can happen, or
Mm-hmm.
what have you seen that has caused difficulty in your recovery?
Sure.
Because
Yeah,
I always thought you
absolutely.
were going to be well far off more than me.
Yeah, yeah. So I can describe. So I got out of transformations. You're my awesome roommate. You went back to Pittsburgh. I decided to stay here in Delray and do, as I said, moved into sober living, right? Um, Sober living, I was doing well. I got a job working at Nine Line Apparel. God bless Nine Line. And got a job. I was making $12 an hour and happier than a pig in shit. And you know why? Because it was a job I looked forward to that gave me value and purpose back in my life. because I was surrounded by the customers that had same values, had same experiences that would just come in and we would talk. And, for that 8-10 hours a day, I was at the clothes. Yeah, I was folding clothes and I was doing inventory, but most of my job was reconnecting with people that remembered who reminded me of who I used to be, right? And restored some of that back in my life. But the 9-line job, I could have easily just continued working that, focused on my recovery, did sober living, done the steps. But there's always like this little voice saying, you need to make up for lost time. So I thought it would be a good idea to accept a job opening up a treatment center here in Delray, working with adolescents that had eating disorders and mental health issues. And I was going to move the 9-line job to part-time on the weekends, and I was going to go into this field that I knew nothing about and completely stressed me out, right? And I was doing it successfully. I didn't even have a vehicle. I had an e-bike down here in Florida, and I was biking to work, 30 minutes there, 30 minutes back. And yeah, it was challenging, but I was still doing good at the job, and I enjoyed it working with, the kids that I had there as clients. And my ego and my pride, which I now recognize as, the evil one, the devil will start speaking in my ear. Hey, Matt, your roommate just became house manager. You got people that are coming to your apartment now that are checking in, doing UAs in your bathroom that you just cleaned, or they're doing BAs at random times of the night. Your privacy is going down. That's not going up. I think it's time for you to get your own place. And that's what the voice told me. So I made a list of pros and cons that, of course, the pros completely outweighed the cons that I showed to my sponsor. And I said, this is why I think I need to get my own place. And he told me, Matt, pray on it. Well, at that point, it didn't matter how much praying or what the answer I got back. I had already decided. The relapse had already started, in my head. It starts well beyond taking the first drink. It starts with the mental and then the emotional state. Emotional being like irritable, discontent, argumentative. I actually had a whole list. I had a good group a while back.
You and your damn notebooks.
Oh, I still got the same black book with all my notes about clients that pissed me off at transformation too. You're not in here, Mark, except when you would sleep, except when you would meditate in the morning on our couch.
In my little taco when I went to sleep.
Yeah, your little
princess castle.
Princess seashell burrito castle. But yeah, these are just some signs that you might be in an emotional stage of relapse. Do any of these sound familiar to anybody? Cockiness, dangerous thinking, complacency, anger, dishonesty, frustration, mind games, greed, lack of gratitude, impatience, argumentative, self-pity, lack of discipline, guilt and shame, depression, unrealistic expectations.
Matt, that's Monday for me. Normally, that's Monday.
I can imagine. I
mean, dude, you got me hooked on the CBT thing.
Oh, yeah, thoughts, feelings,
when I start catch it, check it, change it.
Catch it, 3 C's, bro.
Whenever I have an issue that I don't know what to do with, I go, is it going to kill me, or is it going to hurt me or kill me, or is it going to hurt somebody or kill somebody I love? And it's like, nope. Well, fuck it. It'll work itself out.
Yeah, but I got this new tool. I'll tell you real quick. It's called the Fuck It budget. You would like this one, right?
Oh,
so
yeah.
The principle is this: is we only have so much budget in our day that we can spend our bucks on, right? So if somebody pisses you off or you get resentful or angry at something, you got to say, is that in my fuck it budget? And the principle of the fuck it budget is if you give out too many dollars in your fuck it budget, you get to the end, you have no money. Guess what you say? Fuck it. So as you go through your day, and it goes back to like the 4 agreements, right? Don't take it personally. Don't make assumptions, because when somebody's pissing you off, it's normally a projection of themselves onto others. So, I decide what is going to take up my time today or what's going to rent space in my head, right?
We get to choose if we're going to have a bad day. We wake up,
absolutely
wake up, we have that feeling like, oh, this is going to be one of those days. We have a choice. We either A, we sit and soak in it and let it be a bad day, or B, we do something about it that is within our power to change that outcome. Whether
Sure.
it's, like I wake up in a bad mood, I stub my toe in the bed. Fuck, it's going to be a bad day. And then I look at my girlfriend, my fiance, and go, you know what? My life is pretty fucking good. My toe will heal.
Yeah,
Let's go to work. Let's keep moving.
it starts with, gratitude every morning. I choose to do my gratitude for prayer. When I'm praying, I'm thankful for, everything that I have, because we both know it could be way worse. It always can be worse for us. We're very fortunate, you know. I mean, look around us right now. You have this amazing podcast. You have your own studio right now. Like, yeah, we're gonna get pissed off at things, but God, we have so much, that we have been blessed with. We have this opportunity to bring a message to people out there that might be still listening, right?
Yeah. I mean, the end of the day, I know that if I drink, I lose everything I've worked for, including my life, because I'm open about it. I was going to shoot myself in the head. Like I was ready to kill myself and I passed out. So I got
And
lucky,
it
you
and
know?
like for some people, it might not go right away, but for people that are really battling with this disease, you can almost guarantee in time it will go away. It just might not be right now.
Yeah. It's like this company called Inspiring Sobriety. They have a t-shirt that says, I did not know rock bottom had a basement,
Yeah, there's always
because
a button
that's,
on the floor.
yeah. Because when some sober person goes, have you hit your rock bottom? I'm like, bitch, I hit that when I was 18. Like I've been living in the basement for the last 30 years,
Right.
you know, but listen, tell us what's in store for Matt in the near future.
Yeah,
What's going
man.
on for you?
Yeah, it's all good things. My daily routine consists of, church on Sunday. We're getting ready to go into small groups, starting up this summer. And I've explored, I have a spiritual mentor outside of, an AA sponsor. And they've kind of told me about, hey Matt, have you ever thought about using your spiritual gift as a teacher? I really like instructing. I think God has given me the gift as a teacher, so I might be looking into, running my own church small group here soon. Um, I'm working the steps again with a sponsor right now. I'm going through my step 4 right now. Really doing it very thoroughly, just like the book describes, which is really a blessing, to revisit those, looking back at all my resentments. I just got accepted to Capella full time for their mental health master's program. I start July 7th full time. One of the goals of mine I've always had is to become a therapist and work with veterans and first responders, or at least veterans of the VA in some capacity. But really, man, as long as I stay sober, our potential is unlimited. What we can do. Like I said, you can live a life beyond your wildest dreams. We just have to learn how to deal with life on life's terms and not resort to the easy way out of things, self-numbing, because at the end of the day, those problems are still going to be there tomorrow. But I can wake up today, I can receive a bill in the mail, or I can get bad news, or somebody can piss me off, and I have healthy ways to deal with that these days, right? I don't have to run to the liquor store anymore, because I know, even like they say, like even your worst day sober is better than your best day drunk, right? Or something along those lines,
Yeah,
right?
brother,
So,
like, you remember me in rehab. Like I didn't talk for the first week. And now look at me, you know what I mean? Like I'm airing my dirty laundry every week. I'm
sure.
talking about how I
Yeah,
wanted
man.
to kill myself, like you're doing, I really think I'm proud of you. Like I'm proud of you.
Thank you.
Like you've been through a rough 2 years,
Hmm.
and you got your own shit going on and you're still dealing with it. You're still fighting, but I think that there's nothing you can't accomplish. If I can come out of my shell enough to put other people first and to put service work and put this type of thing in front of all the shit that I have and the things that I want to do. And just remember that at the end of the day, as a recovering alcoholic, I have two purposes. One is to stay sober and happy, and two is to show other people that it is possible.
Be of service
That's
to
my goal.
others.
That's what I'm
Yeah,
supposed to do.
absolutely, man. I couldn't agree with you more. They say, was it trust God, clean house, help another alcoholic, right?
Yep. Trust God, clean house, help
Help another.
others.
Yep, that's
Well,
it, bro.
listen, I
Yeah,
love
man.
you, man, and I
I love
miss
you more,
you.
man.
And turn your phone off. Goddamn, do not disturb. Because every time I call you and it goes there, I think you're relapsing. I'm like, motherfucker, he's going again. Um, but no, I want to have you back like in a week or
Yeah, man.
two, and I
Yeah, we'll
want to
figure it out.
like. Yeah, I want to, when you come back, I just want to talk. I just want to have a conversation, not about our past, not about our history, but talk about the disease, talk about what we can do to help and just talk about the environment that we live in now. And I want to know when you hit your year. I want to know when you get this year back, because you're going to do it this time. You're going to do it. I got nothing but faith in you, brother. I love you more than anybody, and I really miss seeing you every day and, listening to you snore and wake up the neighbors. But is there anything you want to say to the people that are watching or listening? Anything you want to leave them with?
Yeah, man. If you're listening to this and you're going through a rough stretch, there is help out there. And, whether you're on active duty still or you're facing some dark times, it does get better. You know, we have people every single day that are, you know, like Mark, who opens up this podcast and can just be a shining bright light to those that think there probably isn't light at the end of the tunnel. So I appreciate you having me on today, man, and definitely looking forward to joining you again and spreading the message of hope, because it does get better, man.
Yeah, folks, that's my personal savior and brother, Matthew Brooks. Thanks again. For those of you, steelcityroundtablepodcast.com is the website, steelcityroundtable@gmail.com. Check out our socials. Just remember that the hardest part of recovery is being willing to ask for help. If you can get there, you can do it. I'm proof that a knucklehead with a total narcissist personality and bad behaviors and total fucking batshit crazy life can stay sober and make it, because he's got people like Matt Brooks in his corner. I've got people like my future wife, Shelly, in my corner. The world only becomes a better place if you want it to be better and you do the work. So remember, there's always a seat here for you at the Steel City Roundtable. I love you all. Matt, I'll talk to you soon.
See you, buddy. Thanks for having me on.